to be very welcome, everybody. It's not as large a crowd as we had on First Friday in February, but thank you for coming, and thank you for participating and supporting both the Peoria Art Guild and Bradley University in particular. We want to welcome everybody to the 39th Bradley International Print and Drawing Exhibition. I'm going to present a little bit about the history of it and what it has meant to Peoria for the most part. Susanne will talk a little bit about Aurora, who was the juror that I think you will find, she was so exceptional. And then Cathie and Angela both have prints in the show. Not to make Cathie here a mature, but she has been in 9 times.
No,
which,
only 8.
Only 8?
Only 8. But this is the first time that I've gotten 2
prints.
So I'm really thrilled.
And this is Angela's first time. And what they both are relief print makers, but they're going to talk a little bit also about other processes and what makes a good print and what qualifies. Because as Cathie said, she's been in 8 times. It's not that she's only entered 8 times. I've entered a lot of times, and that it's very subjective, and it all has to do with actually the juror, for the most part.
Well, the juror and the people that submit
They
artwork
work too.
to be reviewed.
This is the 39th one. I will say, from what I could gather, because I was not born at the time, but in 49, 50, and 51, I believe it was an annual. And it then ended up becoming, because it became a very, very popular, and I hate to call them competitions, but it's an exhibition, though, that was curated by, juried exhibition. And from that, we have had such great success as a community event. Originally, Lakeview Museum, and actually the very first time it was still Lakeview Center for the Arts and Sciences, and Bradley and Peoria Art Guild, Lakeview Museum did it. We've had in different community agencies. The Prairie Center did it when they were participated in it. And what the wonderful thing is that it is the most important collection of prints and drawings at this time, contemporary-wise. And I think that it's changed. Jeff and I have been going since 1973, when we were juniors in high school. Don Kettleborough and Frank Hagan took us to Lakeview. And then we also lived over near Bradley, and our father would let us go on campus and run wild, and we would go to Duryea, which Duryea was like about a quarter of the size. The gallery was very small. Honest to goodness, my favorite memory is that you could actually look at the gallery, and on one corner of Bradley Avenue, you could actually see the street because it was separated. It was time to get a new building, and that's when they got Glazer. In 1993, we had a new dean, Jack Bowman, and Jack Bowman his charge was to give a global presence to Bradley University. And one of the first things he realized that would maybe put us on the map was to take the Bradley National to an international stage. And so I worked from 93 till 95. It was 95 was the first. And what we did was we worked with the Soros Foundation. And back then it was still Eastern Bloc countries. And we worked with they had contacts in all of the cultural centers in the Eastern Bloc countries, from Czechoslovakia to Yugoslavia to Poland. And we got an incredible response from them. And that's the only time, and Susanne will talk about the juror, but that was the only time that I actually told a juror, Mark Pasquale it was actually, who's up in the curator of prints and drawing at the Art Institute. I said, we had about 30 or 35 carousels back then. And I said, these 5, you have to choose from them because they're international and they have to be in if we're going to really be international. And since then, we've had great response. I think we need to work at it and get a little more focused on trying to get more, recruiting more international artists than what we have this year. We have 6, I believe it is.
I think we only have 3.
Well, we have, but like we have
pieces. Okay,
pieces
so
by American artists that are living like
in
in Japan,
Right.
as an example.
And
But
2 from Sao Paulo, the same artist in
But-
Brazil.
But anyhow, it is so exciting to see how art and printmaking in particular, and drawing, has changed from the 1970s in particular to then. When we started out, we had my mentor, Mauricio Lazansky at the University of Iowa, Leonard Baskin, who is an American printmaker and book artist that is world-renowned. These are people that entered into Bradley National. And if you go to a print book at the Peoria Public Library, just on printmaking, and you look at the people's vita, their biographies, if they were in Bradley National at the time, it is listed as an important exhibition. And I think it really has returned to being that. This is one of the most, I think, comprehensive and diverse exhibitions that we've had in a long time. And it has a lot to do with Aurora. So why don't you introduce Aurora to us? I wish she was here, guys. She is a delight and a half.
She is a delight, and she in herself is an international artist. Although she does live in America now. She was born and raised in Cuba, and she now lives in New Paltz, New York, where she is assistant professor of printmaking at State University of New York. Through her work, there's a balance of scholarly and material research, and a lot of her artwork has taken the form of artist books. And as a Cuban American, the content of her books is oftentimes researching other female Cuban artists who have not actually received documentation.
No,
You know, so
or notoriety.
And so she's very she wants to keep that history alive. But she and her family, they came over to the United States in the 1990s in a raft. So they were one of thousands of Cubans that built rafts and escaped Cuba and went to Miami. And at that point in time, the Navy sent a lot of large ships out to intercept all of these rafts because there were just so many of them heading towards Miami. And so it's interesting, it echoes what's happening today. They intercepted the rafts and these people went to the camps in Guantanamo. So Aurora and her family spent 10 months in Guantanamo in the camps there. They finally did make it to Miami, and you know, it was very much of a culture shock for Aurora.
She was like 12 years old, I
Yes,
think, wasn't she? Yeah.
Yes, and she did not know English at all, so she, you know, went to school and had to learn English, and I think she felt very, very alienated, and I think that she went into kind of a depression, and her mother kind of introduced her to an artist who thought she could work with her to bring her out of, you know, this kind of stupor. And so that was her introduction to art, and she could finally express herself, whereas she had a hard time communicating verbally. And so she followed the path of the artist, and she went from Miami. When she finished school, she went up to New York City, and she lived there for 20 years. She got her BFA at the Cooper Union, and then she went to the University of Iowa for her MFA in printmaking. She ended up, after getting her MFA, working for 10 years in publishing at Two Palms Press in New York. They collaborate with a lot of artists to make prints, and there she learned a whole lot of printmaking techniques just by working there with any number of different artists and different projects that they wanted to publish. So about, I guess it's been 7 years ago, in the summer, I attended a workshop called Monotype Printing and the Art of the Book. And it was given at the Anderson Ranch. And who was the leader of this workshop? Aurora. And she made such an impact on me. She was, I mean, so knowledgeable and so very facile with multiple techniques in the print shop. And she had just finished a residency at the Anderson Ranch. She was there for, I think, 2 months maybe over the winter, where she worked on a book of color, and it was done on a lithography press, and she showed us pictures of it, but it was inspired, I think, by her experience on the raft, where seeing the water in all different lights. So she did multiple layers of color on each page, and it's reflective of that experience. It's kind of a vastness that she experienced. When it opens up, it's really wide. And I was just taken by her, and I never forgot. It was just a very rich experience. And so when it came time for this 39th Bradley International, which I am coordinating, who did I think of? Aurora, of course, to be the juror. I didn't know she was at SUNY New Paltz, so I had to find her and sent her pictures from the workshop so that she could remember me. Because it was 7 years later and times change, and she responded positively, and it was just wonderful to have her come.
I think, though, one of what made her such a unique and wonderful juror is that these life experiences transcended into her choices of what she saw, some kind of human characteristic or some kind of human relationship or something in each piece. And that often, and I always tease, I loved Fran Myers, was taught up at the University of Wisconsin, and she and her husband, Warrenton Colescott, both were printmakers, and we asked her to jury one time. And I had to tease, but I have never seen so many Wisconsin printmakers in one exhibition in my life. And it's just a natural thing. But yet that wasn't how Aurora approached it. She approached looking at each one of these pieces as individuals and what were they saying. And this time, and Bradley, I really have to commend them. They, instead of charging an outlandish price per piece, they did $40 for 5 pieces. And almost all of us entered as many pieces as we could. And she took multiple pieces quite often because that artist really had a strong language or a strong voice that she related to. And I think that's what makes it also so unbelievably diverse, but also really interesting. I mean, I go to I've gone to all the galleries, and I hope all of you have gone to all the galleries, and you'll see that there's a personality that kind of has been created with the conversations that each gallery has, according to who's curated it and the selection of those pieces.
Well, she went out of her way to really, you know, every artist has their lens that they see the world through and that they see art through. And she went out of her way to stretch her own sense of prejudice to select works that were beyond what she would ordinarily gravitate towards. So she did do that as well, and I think living in New York City in the art scene, you are exposed to so much art that, you know, she has quite a range of visual experience too, and I think she wanted to highlight multiple levels of skill. There are graduate students in this show, as well as artists that have been here repeatedly, like Cathie.
young artists.
And young artists, exactly. And she really wanted that whole collection, that whole range.
And it was interesting because Susanne allowed Jeff and I to help divide up the exhibition. Part of it is because we're familiar with all the galleries that it's been in, and there are certain limitations that we can do at the museum, that we can do here. 8 foot is the largest we can do. And so we divided it up. And when Jeff and I are thinking of curating an exhibition, we're looking at the whole body, and we want to create a conversation that goes from part A all the way to C, or D, or Z, whatever it takes. And I will tell you that what we selected, and as we pulled them out and they unpacked them, that these 4 colorful pieces were the first things, and there was no doubt that we wanted to set the tone for that gallery as a colorful one. And so Cathie's pieces in particular, which you can speak to this in just a minute, but is all about color. I mean, the color is really what dictates her impression of the world, I think. And Sarah Smelzer, I had back when she was in graduate school, and I was just starting at Bradley, and I remember that she had a piece all the way back into 1993. And then this, I can't even remember who this is by. Do you remember the name of that person? Susanne?
Matt Ballou from Columbia, Missouri.
But
that is not a print.
That is a drawing. But I could not believe how well it worked in with the other prints and drawings. And so we set the tone that way. It does. It was just and it's not. It's a very patient person, which I would never have been able to do that ever in my entire life. I'd be able to do that. But Cathie, you and Angela both do relief printmaking.
Yes, we're both relief printmakers. But you have to go to the museum to see Angela's, but in my opinion, her print is one of the best things at the museum. I was so impressed when I saw it. So you have to get to the museum to see her work. She works in linoleum, I work in wood. We both print the surface of the printing matrix. That's why it's called relief. And I'd like to talk about some of the techniques.
Go for it.
I actually want people to walk around. But first I want to talk about, well, one thing I'd like everyone to know that if you want to know how I did either of my 2 prints, you can go to my website, CathieCrawford.com, and there's a section called How I Print, and you can see run by run just how I made both of these prints. This was done in 14 runs to the press. That was done in 8 runs to the press. But they were both printed from one block of wood because I'm a reduction printmaker. I don't use, well, very rarely do I use multiple blocks. So it's a very long process. I want you to understand that printmaking is not done in an afternoon. Anyway, and so she is also a relief printmaker, but this is a monotype, which means there's only one and there's no printing matrix, but she is printing in relief. And her work's very different from mine. She is really into drawing, whereas my painterly. She doesn't like to paint, she likes to draw. And this is called a trace monotype. It can be done without a press. It requires very little pressure, but she literally inks up a slab of probably glass or plexiglass, and then puts paper down and draws from the back, so transferring the ink from the pressure of her pencil through the paper to this very thin layer of ink. So it's a very different approach. I'm kind of heavy-handed with the ink. She's very light-handed, very thin, stiff layers of ink. And if we can walk around, I'd like to go to the other room and talk about the first prize winner. Sorry, I should have thought about that.
And Cathie, can I just say, I also want people to understand, monotype or monoprint means one.
Right.
And all the other prints that we have here are addition.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that one is more original
They're
or
all
worth more.
original
They're
works
all
of art.
original. And I think people get this idea
Yeah.
that because there's 10 or because there's 25 or 200, that they're
Yeah,
less.
how many
It
Angela
just-
prints? They
Yep.
are all original works of art, hand printed by her. So it's not like she made one and then copied it.
Yep.
No,
Right.
each one is an original work of art. So this is the first place prize winner, and it is an absolutely gorgeous lithograph. And I just want to talk about the process of printmaking. Involves 4 major categories of art. Relief is one of them. I've already covered that. Now I'm going to talk about another major media, which is lithography. And this is so typical of a beautiful lithographic wash that you can't get any other way except in lithography. So these wonderful tonal values, you can't just do that with pen and ink on drawing paper. It just wouldn't work. This is a very typical lithographic wash, and it's a very abstract horse. It's I love the title. It's called Gift Horse, but it's very abstract. It kind of reminds me of Deborah Butterfield's sculptures. I just loved it the first time I saw a reproduction of it, but I only got to see it in person this week. And pay close attention to these little flowers because there's people in them. And I didn't even notice that until Jeff pointed it out to me. And I was looking at it for a very long time. But I like both of these pieces, and they are very distinctive to the medium of lithography, which is a planographic process. I'm not going to get into a lot of technical detail, but it works on the principle that grease and water will always repel one another. So the drawing is done with greasy substance. The grease attracts ink. The stone or plate is kept moist with a damp sponge, and the non-image areas will not absorb the ink, and the drawn areas will absorb the ink. That's lithography in a nutshell. It's much more it's the most technical of the 4 major medias of art, but I'm not going to bore you with all those details. But now I'd like to talk about intaglio on this back wall. These are 3 wonderful examples of intaglio printmaking. And intaglio is kind of the umbrella term for about 9 different techniques. There's etching, dry point, engraving, soft ground, hard ground, mezzotint. I'm sure I left one out. Aquatint, yes, how could I leave out aquatint? This is a wonderful example of aqua tint. The values in here, you can't get that any other way except in aqua tint. Just a wonderful example of intaglio printmaking. Intaglio is the opposite of relief because it's what's below the surface that traps the ink and gets transferred to the paper. In intaglio printmaking, you do need a press. It takes a lot of pressure to pull that ink out of those etched lines that are below the surface. So it's just the opposite from relief. But very different imagery, but beautiful examples of the media, these three. And this is etching and engraving. Engraving is done with an engraving tool, no acid involved. Etching involves acid. It's usually done on a zinc or copper plate, so you need a different acid for each metal. But not all the intaglio processes involve acid. Dry point doesn't and engraving doesn't. But beautiful line quality, very typical of engraving and etching, very typical of aqua tint, which is another technique. And this is also mostly aqua tint too. And then we have one over here that's a combination of silk screening and lithography. So printmakers don't always stick to one medium. Sometimes they combine two or three. But we have quite a few examples of silk screens in this show. I think most of you are probably more familiar with silk screening. Everybody's seen somebody pull a squeegee over a screen and get a t-shirt. I think that's the one that most people are familiar with, silk screening. And if you've never seen a silk screen, go to Sid's restaurant. There are two hanging on the wall. And you can see what a silk screen looks like. But that doesn't involve a press, obviously. It just involves silk, or now it's synthetic material stretched over a wooden frame, and a stencil is created and the ink is pushed through the screen with a squeegee. So there are several good examples of silk screening in this show. And I think that's enough for me.
I think it's perfect. It's perfect. Angela, why don't you come forward? First of all, Angela worked with us. She is our master printer here, and one of the things I think that is kind of lost in Peoria in particular is that we have a print studio, and it is a public studio, so that people, as long as you're a member of the Art Guild, you can use that studio. And she's the one that has done it. She is the one that printed all of our pieces for the Portfolio 24. And if any of you are interested in looking at that, we can probably pull one out tonight and show you. But what is it like to be first time out, first time you enter Bradley International and you get accepted?
It's been pretty surreal. I grew up in the area, but I recently just got my bachelor's degree in fine art from Eastern Illinois University just over a year ago. I graduated not this past December, but the December before. And then I contacted the Art Guild slightly before I graduated and got a printmaking job here where I'm teaching printmaking classes. So it's been a big adjustment going from college life to being thrown into the art world. It's been a little bit stressful, but I've had a really great support system. One of the things that I love about this area is we have a really great arts community. Everyone's really nice, super welcoming. With how young I am, I felt like a bit of a rookie walking into like a den of artists that have been around for years. You know, that can be intimidating. As was applying to an international show like the Bradley exhibition, I was not even expecting to get in really. It was my first international show that I've even applied to. So I feel really blessed to be a part of all of this.
And I think it's also always about quality. The juror, no matter who it is, they have a specific set of skills, and it's understanding of visual language or understanding experiences that different artists have, and as a result they have to produce this body of work and everything. The other thing that Angela has done, which has really been heartwarming for me, is that since January, since we started and we're preparing for all of this, that we have had 7 printmaking classes here at the Art Guild. And Oscar Gillespie and I, back in the 80s and 90s, we tried to always orchestrate a some kind of print workshop or something like that so that the public could participate. And we have actually 3 people that take every single class they can from you. And I just think it's really wonderful that I think that printmaking in particular is really making a resurgence. I think that when we have events like this, like the Bradley International, that people understand that printmaking is more affordable. I will say we have sold, or we have, through purchase awards and also just purchases, we have sold 7 pieces here at the Art Guild. And there others have been sold over at Bradley and elsewhere. And I think the thing is, they've been priced correctly. They are an example of original artwork, and you can start your collection. This one, I have to just say, this is one of Sarah Smelzer's graduate students at there. And this is $80. And another group is, there's 3 over in the other in our main gallery by Robert Gomez, who some of you may know. His father did the first heart transplants here in Peoria, and he went to the University of Illinois. He's now in Chicago, but he has some wood engravings, so it's a little bit different than wood carving as she does in the block. But they are absolutely, all 3 of them have sold. And so I'm just very proud that the community is accepting of this. We hope this will be up through March 28th, so that we hope that everybody continues to come back. Find your favorite one, come and enjoy it. Come and believe that it's yours, at least right now, while it's on exhibit. And we want to thank everybody that's come tonight for supporting the Art Guild. We appreciate it. It makes us feel like we're doing the right thing, and that we have a really remarkable exhibition this year, and we owe that to Susanne and to Aurora for pulling everything together and making it really a strong exhibition that I think those of us that are participating in it are very, very proud of. So thank you so much for coming tonight. Oh yes,
I know, and I want you to say something as well. So go ahead, Angela, first.
Yeah, I just wanted to add one more thing. We're really blessed to have a printmaking studio here. I've been thinking of some of these areas, like especially in Illinois, and I think everywhere is almost printmaking deserts, where you can't really quite find, a printmaking studio on every corner. You can find paint everywhere. I feel like even with ceramics classes, you can find them probably in, every other town, especially around bigger cities. But printmaking, sometimes when I'm talking about my work and Cathie's experiences, people go, "Oh, those are cool paintings," and they don't even really understand, what it's creating. Right? They don't even understand, what. Yeah.
I mean, people have known me for 20, 30 years. They still say, "How's the painting going?"
Right. Yeah, they don't, quite understand, and it's not their fault. I think it's just because it's not accessible to the public easily.
Well, literally, they don't really know what a woodcut is.
Right, exactly.
They think, well, what's that? I mean, I've gotten blank looks. One time I actually caught 2 young people trying to look behind the glass to find the wood. Where's the wood? Where's the wood? They don't understand the concept of printmaking. I mean, if I said I was a sculptor, a ceramicist, a painter, a jeweler, they have a concept of what that is. I say I'm a printmaker. I might as well say I'm from Mars, because they just give me this blank look. Well, oh, that's nice. They don't know what. And even just typing on the computer, the word, what do you call it, the automatic word thing, separates woodcut into 2 words. It's not 2 words. It's 1 word. I have to correct it every time. It really ticks me off. My word is 1 word, not 2.
She definitely has an opinion. That's for sure.
Sorry, I got her started.
Suzanne, what did you want to say?
I wanted you to maybe, because you have the history here and at Bradley, to maybe draw a connection between the Bradley International and the Bradley Collection.
Well, the Bradley collection has a great number of
Throughout
prints,
history.
printmaking and drawing from some of the biggest names in printmaking. And we've always, Susanne has orchestrated it so that we still do have the President's Award, the Provost's Award, the Dean's Award, the Chair's Award. And I think it's important that people understand that what we're building is a very comprehensive history of printmaking, starting in the 1949, 1950s, all the way up to the present. And this is a contemporary exhibition. So every time it's going to be totally different. You know, in 2 years, we'll have a new juror, we'll have a new outlook, we may have new things. One of the things that I wrote about in the Community Word when I was reviewing the Bradley International is that there's UPO. I had no idea what UPO was, which is a wonderful material. It's actually used in construction, and it's very durable, it's almost indestructible. And we had 2 artists that used that as their matrix. Instead of paper, they used that to print on and to draw on. And I've never seen that. And it's truly 21st century. It's not what was happening, you know.
No trees died.
No trees died, that's for sure. But I think that's what's really so exciting is that we see new things and we see things differently too. And it's good for us to have to rethink our visual language as well as our actual language. Monoprint. So anyhow, but please continue to come back. We're here till the 28th of March and at all 4 venues, and they're all free. You just need to contact Bradley and the museum to make sure that when they're open. Thank you.
There's 2 galleries at Bradley.
Yep. Hartman and Wexler.
Thank you.